A woman mocked a stranger on a park bench for how he dressed. Seconds later, a single glance stopped her cold. What she saw towering above the street shattered every assumption she'd just made. The sun hung high above the city, casting a soft golden glow that made the park feel almost dreamlike. It was one of those afternoons where the air was warm but not stifling, where the hum of distant traffic blended with the occasional laughter of children and the rustle of wind through trees. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. On the neatly trimmed grass, families lounged lazily on picnic blankets, while professionals in business attire clutched iced coffees and murmured into their Bluetooth earpieces. The park was alive, but in a gentle, unhurried way, the city exhaling. Down one of the stone-paved walkways, a man walked with quiet purpose. He was black, maybe in his early 30s, tall and lean with a calm presence that didn't demand attention, but somehow held it anyway. His clothes were modest. A faded grey hoodie hung loose on his frame, the sleeves slightly stretched from where? His jeans bore the telltale signs of long-time use, frayed at the cuffs, a small hole near the knee. His sneakers, once white, were now a dusty beige, scuffed and tired. His hair was carefully styled into neat locks that reached just past his shoulders, tied back loosely at the nape of his neck. There was something meticulous about it, intentional. Even if understated, he carried a backpack that looked like it had traveled many miles. One of the zippers was half broken, and a corner of a well-used notebook peeked out, its edges worn and curling. Every now and then, he would slow down, take out the notebook, flip through a few pages, and jot something down. His brow would furrow, lips pressing together in silent thought. Then he'd slip the pen behind his ear and keep walking. To most people, he was just another figure in the park. Someone passing through, but not to her. From a table just outside a boutique cafe, a white woman watched him closely. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, with sharply styled blonde hair that framed her face like she had just stepped out of a magazine. Her makeup was light but flawlessly applied, and her pearl earrings shimmered under the sun like they had something to prove. Her outfit was equally deliberate, a crisp white blouse tucked into tailored cream slacks, layered with a soft beige blazer. A silk scarf peeked out from the neckline, patterned and clearly expensive. A gold watch clung to her wrist. Her designer sunglasses, though sleek and modern, couldn't completely hide the narrowing of her eyes as they followed the man's every move. She sipped her latte slowly, like every action had to be controlled and elegant, but her posture was rigid. Her jaw tensed just slightly as the man walked past the cafe entrance and settled on a nearby bench under the shade of a maple tree. There, he opened his notebook once more. From her vantage point, she couldn't see what he was writing, but it didn't matter. Her lips curled ever so slightly, not in a smile, but in something closer to disapproval. Judgment, thinly veiled. To her, he didn't belong. Not because of anything he had done, but because of everything he was. The hoodie, the backpack, the unpolished shoes, the quiet stillness that, in her eyes, didn't match the refined rhythm of the cafe or the curated perfection of the park. She leaned toward another cafe guest, a man in a pale blue button-up scrolling on his phone. In a voice not quite a whisper, she muttered, "It's really sad what they allow in public spaces now. Honestly, just look at him." Her companion raised an eyebrow, then glanced in the man's direction with vague disinterest. The woman continued, her voice just loud enough to carry, "Sitting there like that with those clothes, you'd think someone would have said something." Still unaware, or perhaps choosing not to acknowledge her, the man remained focused on his notes, occasionally, glancing up at the trees as if measuring the angle of the sunlight. The breeze played with the pages of his notebook. His fingers caught them gently, like it wasn't just paper but something worth protecting. To the woman, though, it looked like loitering. She tilted her head, speaking more loudly now, as if for the benefit of anyone who might listen. "You'd think he could at least try to look respectable." A young barista behind the cafe window paused mid-wipe of a glass, glancing outside with discomfort. Her eyes darted to the woman, then to the man, then back again. But she said nothing, retreating behind the espresso machine. The man shifted, slightly as though sensing the energy, even if not the words. His jaw flexed. He didn't look toward the woman, But he did close his notebook and place it gently back into the backpack. He sat for another few minutes, watching the children run past with bubbles and kites. Then, with deliberate calm, he stood, slung his backpack over one shoulder, and began walking toward the far exit of the park. The woman watched him go, satisfied, as if she had restored some sort of order, but she had no idea who she had just spoken about, or what she was about to discover. The man sat down slowly, easing onto the edge of the public bench, just a few steps from the cafe's patio seating. The maple tree above offered generous shade, casting speckled patterns of sunlight across the concrete and the worn fabric of his hoodie. He rested his backpack beside him with care, then pulled the tattered notebook from its open zipper and laid it on his lap. His fingers, long and nimble, flipped through the pages, each one filled with scribbled equations, messy diagrams, and chunks of text written in quick looping script. He clicked the end of his pen once, twice, out of habit, then stilled it against the paper and began to write. The world around him faded. The laughter from the children's playground, the low thrum of passing cars, even the hiss of the espresso machine inside the cafe, it all became distant. His thoughts moved faster than his pen could follow, yet he seemed at peace, not hurried, not self-conscious. He didn't see the way the woman on the cafe patio narrowed her eyes the moment he sat down. Perched perfectly at the edge of a white wicker chair, the woman lowered her latte slightly and tilted her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose. Her eyes locked onto the man like a laser carving through glass. The frown came easily, small but sharp, curling at the edges of her mouth. To her left sat a fellow customer, a middle-aged man in a pressed button-up shirt, scrolling absently through his phone. The woman leaned toward him, careful to keep her voice in the realm of polite whispering, but just loud enough to carry the weight of her disdain. "Look at that," she murmured, gesturing ever so subtly with a nod in the man's direction. "It's honestly sad. They let just anyone sit. Here now." The man beside her didn't respond, merely glanced up from his phone, then back down. She wasn't deterred. "I mean the hoodie, the jeans," she continued, her voice rising ever so slightly with each word. "You'd think he could at least dress properly for public. This is not a bus stop." Her words hung in the air, light as smoke but just as suffocating, the kind that wrapped around the listener and demanded to be noticed. A few tables away, a young barista was collecting empty cups from the patio. She paused mid-reach, her hand frozen near a half-drunk cappuccino, eyes flicking toward the woman. Then, without a word, she looked at the man on the bench just for a second. The barista's expression shifted, an awkward blend of guilt, discomfort, and helplessness. Her gaze met the man's briefly. He hadn't looked up when the woman first spoke, but he'd heard her. Every word. His jaw had tightened, just slightly, but he didn't react otherwise. His pen kept moving, though now the lines were slower, more deliberate. There was a stillness in his posture that wasn't peaceful anymore. It was restrained, controlled. He didn't look at her, not because he hadn't heard, but because he had. The barista turned away quickly and disappeared back into the cafe, the door swinging shut behind her with a muted thud. The woman crossed her legs and lifted her chin. She took another sip of her latte and exhaled slowly, as if she'd just done her civic duty. She glanced once more at the man, still there, still writing, still quiet, and shook her head faintly. The man, meanwhile, had stopped writing. His hand rested on the page, unmoving. His eyes focused on a single spot in the notebook, though they weren't reading. They were seeing something else, something farther away. A memory, perhaps. A moment. He closed the notebook gently, like it was something fragile. He didn't slam it shut or shove it away, just folded it calmly and returned it to the bag at his feet. His fingers lingered for a moment on the zipper. Then he looked up, not at the woman, but at the tree canopy above him. The breeze had picked up slightly, ruffling the leaves and brushing a few loose strands of his locks across his forehead. He let out a slow breath through his nose and blinked once. He stood, slowly, and slung the backpack over one shoulder. He turned to leave. His eyes swept across the cafe patio, but again not at her. Not directly. He didn't need to. His silence said everything her words never could. Still, she felt the weight of it, the absence of confrontation, the calm defiance of his walk, the way he didn't shrink under her judgment. Somehow, that unsettled her more than if he had shouted back. She looked down at her cup, suddenly uncertain. Her fingers tightened on the handle as though anchoring herself. The man disappeared down the sidewalk, swallowed by the rhythm of the city, leaving behind only the impression of something quiet, but unshakable. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story. But soon, she would. The woman shifted in her seat, pretending to stretch, though her eyes never left the bench under the maple tree. Honestly, she muttered to no one in particular, though loud enough for her voice to cut through the soft chatter of the patio. He looks homeless or a dropout. God knows what he's doing here. Her words floated into the air like ash from a burning bridge, casual, flippant, but designed to sting. The people around her heard. Some glanced her way, others glanced at the man, but no one said anything. Until now he hadn't responded. But this time he looked up. His eyes met hers across the space. There was no confrontation in them, no sharpness or fury, just a deep, steady tiredness. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of swallowing indignities and trying not to let them change you. His gaze didn't challenge her. It just looked through her, like he was searching for something that wasn't there and confirming that yes, it still wasn't. He held her gaze for a second longer, then looked away, his eyes resting on the leaves overhead. "Just getting some air," he said quietly, his voice low and even. There was no sarcasm in his tone, no aggression, just a tired softness. That's all. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. Not mocking, not cheerful. The kind of smile someone gives when they've long since stopped expecting grace from the world. She scoffed audibly, tossed her napkin onto the plate beside her half-finished drink, and rose to her feet. She adjusted her handbag over her shoulder, dusted a perfectly unwrinkled pant leg, and walked away with quick, self-important steps. Her heels clicked against the stone path as she disappeared around the corner, her blonde bob catching the light like a halo. She never looked back. The man sat still for a moment longer, watching the space she'd occupied. Then he turned his gaze forward, his shoulders relaxing as though he'd been holding something in. He didn't sigh, he didn't shake his head. He didn't mutter anything under his breath. Instead, with slow, deliberate movements, he reached into his backpack and pulled out his notebook again. He opened it to the last page he'd been writing on, but he didn't continue the sentence. His pen hovered above the paper, motionless. Then, without explanation, he closed it again. There was something different in the way he moved now. Before, he had looked like a man at peace, someone simply enjoying the warmth of the afternoon, the quiet rhythms of his own mind. Now a subtle tension had crept into his limbs, like a cord pulled too tight beneath the skin. He zipped the notebook away, slung the backpack over one shoulder, and stood. As he walked toward the park exit, the breeze tousled his locks slightly, and the shadow of the tree followed him a few steps before letting him go. He didn't walk quickly, but there was purpose in his stride now. Something quiet and unspoken, and for the first time people began to notice him, not because of the hoodie or the scuffed shoes, but because of the strange, quiet weight he left behind, like a presence you only feel after it's gone. The barista, from earlier, stood behind the cafe window drying a glass. She paused when she saw him leave. Her eyes followed him as he passed the sidewalk, and then drifted to the now empty bench. She didn't know who he was, but something about him unsettled her. A woman walking her dog passed by shortly after, and paused near the same bench. She looked down at something shiny on the ground, just a simple pen probably dropped by the man. She picked it up, examined it. Heavy, metal, engraved with initials. MC, she read aloud, then slipped it into her purse. She didn't know why. Something about the moment felt worth remembering. As the man rounded the corner and disappeared from sight, no one knew where he was going. No one thought to ask. Not yet. But something had shifted, like the moment before a storm. The woman strode briskly down the street, her heels tapping against the concrete in confident rhythm. She had somewhere to be, or at least she wanted to look like she did. There was something satisfying in the echo of her steps, something that made her feel solid, important, untouchable. The sun had shifted slightly in the sky now, casting long shadows across the sidewalks. The city buzzed with the low hum of activity, the distant honk of traffic, the murmur of voices from store windows, the rhythmic whoosh of passing buses. She rounded the corner onto a main street, adjusting her sunglasses and smoothing her blazer with one hand. But then she stopped, dead in her tracks. Her breath caught in her throat before she even realized why. There, towering above her on the side of a red brick building, was a billboard. Massive, unmissable, and on it, him. The same, black man from the park, but this time he wasn't wearing a hoodie or scuffed sneakers. No notebook, no bench, no shade tree. He stood tall in a sharply tailored navy blue suit, crisp white shirt beneath, no tie. His arms were crossed with calm authority, his posture straight, assured. His locks were pulled back neatly, and the expression on his face was clear, direct, composed. The kind of gaze that met you eye to eye and dared you to look away first. Above him, bold letters gleamed in the sun. Dr. Malik Carter, award-winning neuroscientist and founder of MindReach Foundation. And beneath that, in smaller print, bridging communities and science, changing lives one mind at a time. She stared. Her mouth parted slightly. For a moment she forgot where she was. The street noise dulled to a hum in her ears. The world tilted slightly, not in a dramatic way, but in the way that happens when something cracks inside your certainty. When something you knew to be true turns out to be utterly, painfully wrong. The man she had scoffed at, the one she'd whispered about, sneered at, dismissed without hesitation, was Dr. Malik Carter. Not just someone with a job or a degree or a home, but one of the most celebrated neuroscience minds in the city, a man who'd given TED Talks, been featured in magazines, launched a foundation for youth mental health initiatives across underserved communities. She had read that name before, she'd seen that face before, just never like this, not in a hoodie, not on a park bench, and certainly not in a moment when she held the power. Now she felt it slipping from her fingers like sand. As she stood frozen, others walked by. A couple paused, pointing up at the billboard with admiration. A boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking, "Is that the guy who talked at my school?" Someone else took a picture. She heard bits of their conversation, blurred but clear enough. "He's the one that started that brain clinic in the South District. Yeah, I heard he turned down a huge offer from a pharmaceutical company to keep his work non-profit. Genius, literal genius." Each word sank deeper into her chest. She reached for her sunglasses, lifting them slightly, as if her eyes were deceiving her. As if looking more clearly would reveal a different face, a different truth. But no, it was him. The same tired, soft-spoken man who had said nothing cruel in return, who had simply said, "Just getting some air." Now he looked down at her, not from a bench, but from a billboard, and she realized she had no idea who he really was, because she had never cared to ask. Her grip on her purse tightened. The perfectly stitched leather strap dug into her palm. A strange heat crept up her neck, not from the sun, but from something else, something colder. Shame, the kind that doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps in slowly. A drip, a sting. The echo of your own voice replaying in your head, now heavy with the weight of ignorance. She tried to shake it off, straightened her posture, pressed her lips into a hard line, but the feeling didn't leave, because the truth was this. She hadn't just misjudged a stranger. She had exposed herself to the barista, to the cafe patrons, to him, and now, to herself. She turned away from the billboard quickly, as if not seeing it would undo what she had done. But even as she walked, her steps were slower now, less certain. The sound of her heels no longer echoed, with the same sharp pride. For the first time in a long while, the city around her felt larger than she did, and far more honest. As she disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the city she thought she understood, the world didn't pause. But somewhere, in memory, in meaning, in something larger than the present, time shifted, and for a moment, the narrative rewound. Spotlight, a stage, an audience holding their breath. Malik stood in front of the TEDx letters in a charcoal grey suit, sleeves slightly rolled up, speaking with calm passion. "The human brain," he said, gesturing to a 3D model behind him, "isn't just a vessel of memory. It's an engine of transformation. With the right environment, the right care, we don't just heal, we adapt. We grow, even when life gives us every reason not to." The crowd erupted in applause, not out of obligation, but from the quiet. Awe that comes when a truth resonates deeper than expected. A small sunlit room, whiteboards covered in drawings of neurons and handwritten notes. Teenagers, black, brown, and everything in between, sat around him, hanging on every word. Malik crouched beside a young boy, pointing to a diagram he had sketched in marker. "This is you," he said gently. "This is your brain after trauma. And this," he drew connecting lines, dots, new branches, "this is what healing can look like. Not forgetting, rewiring. You are not broken, you are becoming." The boy's eyes welled, but he nodded. In a dim community center office, he sat alone at a table, his notebook open. The same notebook from the park, but now the pages flipped, like scenes from a film. Meticulous brain maps, notes for an upcoming conference in Geneva, drafts of a curriculum for a free seminar, neuroscience for inner-city educators. A budget breakdown for new laptops at the youth center, a sketch of a brain labeled in sharp black ink. Empathy lives here. On another page, crumpled, coffee-stained, a single quote circled twice. "They tried to bury us. They didn't. No, we were seeds." Another memory. Malik standing behind a podium in a crowded high school gym. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled at the elbows. Students chattered, distracted, until he said his first sentence. "I grew up in a place where people assumed I'd be dead or jailed by 25. Silence. I'm 33. I have 2 PhDs, and I still wear hoodies and ride the subway. Because your mind doesn't make you better than anyone, it just makes you responsible for knowing better." Phones came out. Students leaned forward. A girl in the back wiped her eyes. Cut again. A rainy afternoon. Malik kneeling beside a woman and her son outside a clinic. The boy was trembling, his mother frantic. The doctor on staff had refused to see them without insurance. Malik, though not officially on duty, had happened to stop by with supplies. Without hesitation, he took off his coat and placed it around the boy's shoulders. "Come inside," he said. "Let's take care of you." Back to the park. That. Same bench. Days earlier, Malik laughing quietly to himself as he jotted notes between sips of coffee. A squirrel tried to climb into his backpack. He playfully shooed it away. Nearby, a child dropped her toy and began to cry. Malik picked it up, dusted it off, and returned it with a warm smile. The child beamed. This man, so often invisible in plain sight, had always been there. Present, human, brilliant. And yet, every time someone looked at him through the lens of worn shoes or brown skin or tired eyes, they saw only the outer layer, never the fire beneath it. Back in the present, Malik walked past a bookstore window a few blocks from the park. He stopped for a moment. His billboard was visible from here too, though smaller, in the reflection of the glass. He caught his own image, dressed in a hoodie again, backpack slung, casually over one shoulder, and smiled faintly at the reflection of the man in the suit above. There was no pride in his smile, no arrogance. Just a quiet recognition. A man can be both, and still be misjudged. He reached into his backpack, pulled out the same notebook, and flipped to a fresh page. He began to write. Not a lecture this time. Not a grant proposal or brain map or therapy. Modeled a journal entry. Today I was mistaken for less again, but I held my tongue, not out of silence but strength. Let the world underestimate. I'll keep building what they don't see coming. Sometimes the greatest minds go unnoticed, not because they're hidden, but because people never learn to look deeper. Sometimes brilliance wears a hoodie, and sometimes the most powerful statement is the one made with grace. Evening had settled over the city like a soft exhale. The park, once buzzing with laughter, footsteps and distant chatter, had quieted. The sky overhead faded into a lavender hue, streaked with gold, where the last threads of sunlight lingered. On the horizon, tree branches swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling like whispers, gentle, unbothered. That same bench sat beneath the same oak tree, now half-shadowed, half-glowing in the golden hour light. Empty, still, a quiet witness to the day's stories. Then slowly a figure appeared, slight, hesitant, maybe 13 or 14. A boy, wiry and brown-skinned, with sneakers a little too big and sleeves slightly too long. His hoodie was navy and well-worn, the hem frayed at the wrist where he idly tugged at the fabric. He glanced around before he sat, one foot tucked under, the other leg, and unzipped a faded black backpack. Out came a notebook. The boy flipped it open, scanning pages filled with scrawled thoughts and half-finished drawings. He chewed on his pen cap for a second, then started to write. Slowly at first, then faster, like the words had been waiting all day to escape. From a distance, a jogger passed. A couple strolled hand in hand. Life continued, unaware of the quiet significance of that moment. But if someone had been watching, closely really watching, they might have seen something familiar in the way the boy sat, the way he occasionally tapped the page with the back of his pen while thinking, the way his head tilted, as if listening to his own thoughts before he dared to commit them to paper, like a mirror of the man who had once sat there before him. Different hoodie, different age, same fire, flickering quietly beneath the surface. The sun dipped lower. Golden light stretched long and soft across the grass, touching the bench like a spotlight before fading slowly into dusk. The breeze picked up, and, with it, a page of the boy's notebook fluttered and lifted. He grabbed it, laughing to himself, holding it down again with both hands. His smile was small but full, unaware of what had happened on that bench hours earlier. Unaware that a stranger, another man once judged by his silence, had sat in that exact spot, writing thoughts that would go on to challenge minds and change lives. But perhaps in some unspoken way, he felt it, felt the echo, felt the permission to dream with his hoodie on, to sit and think and write and be without needing to prove or perform or explain. Somewhere traffic hummed into the night, windows lit up in apartment buildings, cafes turned off their signs. The world spun on, and the billboard still stood, just blocks away, its image unchanged, its message echoing a little louder now in the cooling air. Narration. Don't judge a person by their clothes or their silence. Some of the brightest minds don't shine the way you expect, but they shine anyway. The boy looked up at the darkening sky, then back down at his notebook. His pen moved again. Soft, steady, brilliant.